Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the HuskHer fan sports show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Go Big Redcast, a very special edition of the HuskHer Huddle. I am your host, Abby, and with me is Mike Beuouy, the co-founder of Evollve.net. Let me unmute you. Apparently, there we go. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Abby.
How are you today now that you can speak into the microphone?
Doing great, and yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast.
Yeah, we love it. Anybody who has kind of watched it or has talked to me knows, kind of a big nerd. I did some work at one point with some people who did some like head coaching analytic things. So I've got a little bit of a background in data. And so this was when I found out about you guys and you reached out, it seemed like a no-brainer to have you on and to get to talk about this kind of stuff. So Mike, for people who don't know what Evollve.net is, can you give just a brief overview of what it is? Where did it come from? Who are you?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess I'll start. So I came into volleyball late. I really got into it after my daughter joined her middle school volleyball team. It was the first team sport she'd ever joined. I was really excited about it. And prior to that, I'd done quite a lot of work as like a hobby on sports analytics. I have another site called Unpredictable.com that does a lot of stats on NBA and WNBA, and it's always been a ton of fun for me. And so when she joined the volleyball team, I wanted to learn more about the sport. And my way of learning about things is kind of nerding out and learning about all the analytics. And so when I started looking into it, started talking to people that know the sport and, have done really good work on this, kind of realized that, there was an opportunity for, more public facing work on the volleyball stats and analytics side. And one of our co-founders, Calvin Wetzel, had this idea as well and had reached out to me when I started sharing some of my volleyball analytic initial work on Twitter and proposed, let's try to build, a volleyball analytics website, something that, the public can go to that, just doesn't really exist right now. And we eventually brought in Aaron Barzilai, who runs the Her Hoop Stats website. So kind of the place to go for women's basketball stats, both WNBA and college. And so for the three of us, we launched in 2023. We started off with team stats. And then in the 2024, we added player stats as well. And in 2025, we added schedule and game level predictions as well as conference predictions. It's just been really exciting to just, see what we can build, see what is of use to the volleyball community. Because like we said, there weren't any really good options that were publicly available. A lot of interesting work being done on the volleyball analytics front, but we wanted to make something that was, a bit more accessible, easy to navigate, and, people to play around with and learn more about the game.
Why is that important to you, that it's publicly available for people to play around with?
It's just, it's fun for me. And like, I feel like a lot of people, the ones that like to nerd out on the data and like, you really understand the stats, like, it's the same reason I started my Unpredictable website. It was fun for me. And, I knew there was a lot of like-minded folks like me that, really like to dive into this stuff. And one thing I've always been interested in, like, regardless of the sport I'm trying to analyze is, really understanding kind of like what drives winning. That's the question I always find the most interesting. And so whether that's in basketball, in football, in volleyball, like really kind of, understanding like fundamentally like what the important things are in a sport has always been an interesting question to me.
So you've done a couple of these different sports, and that question is so interesting about like what drives winning. You've done this with basketball and you talked a little bit about football. Are there consistencies across those sports and volleyball, or have you found that each of them are just kind of their own little monsters?
It's a little of both, and that's what makes it interesting. So it's always cool to see like how one concept translates over into a different sport. So like volleyball and one, like our Evollve team ratings, they're really focused on not really looking at teams win-loss record, but like how many points they win. And that is a lesson you kind of learn all the time in sports analytics. Win-loss records can be noisy. So you really focus on the core kind of atomic version of what a team does well. Do they score points well? And that's in basketball, it's in football. You can do the same with volleyball. And so that was one lesson that carried over really easily into volleyball is you get a much better predictive version of what teams are good by looking at how many points they win as opposed to just say their win-loss record.
What's been the most interesting about volleyball in this time since 2023, since you started?
The most interesting, I'm sorry?
Yeah, the most interesting thing that you've learned.
I think just the intricacies of the game, particularly once we started delving into the player level stats, it's the chess match in terms of just the different rotation strategies and how the game plays out based on where a player is in a rotation, how teams evolve, playing serve receive versus transition. So there was this whole world that was really interesting to learn about, and how teams do better in different phases of the game. So like I said, I kind of came to the sport late. I felt learned a lot in the past 3 years, and I still got a ton more to learn, but that's been the most interesting is just the underlying chess matches of a volleyball game, and understanding and how to bring stats to the forefront on that.
Have you sent any of this over to your daughter's volleyball teams to try to help them win, or is she just no, please don't?
Not yet. I've kind of kept it all between that. I did actually come up with a way to do team rankings for her volleyball league. I couldn't resist it, and so kind of a Evollve team rating for high school sports. So I actually published the code on GitHub and we shared it on my Twitter account. So that's as close as I've done. But for the most part, it's just been fun, watching her have fun playing the game and learning new skills. So
awesome. So you started this in 2023, but about what year did your daughter start playing? So when did you kind of start watching volleyball and seeing the explosion of women's sports and volleyball in particular? Had you kind of been aware of it before 2023, or was that really your first dive into NCAA volleyball?
I've been, 2022 is when my daughter joined her team. So I think that was, when I really started getting into the sport. I was aware of it and actually had a cousin who played for Western Kentucky. She was an outside hitter for a few years. And my mom's side of the family is from Kansas City. That's kind of volleyball country. A lot of my aunts played volleyball. So I was, aware of the sport, but, I didn't really start diving deep into it until 2022.
Okay. So you get to, you're riding the wave of just the explosion that is women's volleyball.
That's exactly what it feels.
The perfect time for it. I love that. That's, as somebody so I grew up in Nebraska. We played volleyball. I played volleyball growing up. It was never good enough. Not a collegiate volleyball player. I'm 5'4", and liberos weren't a thing when I was, they were just starting to become a thing when I was playing. So there was never hope for me growing up, but it's been really fun watching it grow. And there's a part of me that's so jealous of the people who just get to experience this, the current era of volleyball where, the girls, the players are well known and they're well deservedly known. And the sport gets all this attention and it gets to be on TV. We get to watch the entire tournament, and there's a desire, that you're filling a desire that it's wild for me to even think about that would be a thing. People little baby Abbie would never have thought that somebody would have a whole website about volleyball analytics. And so I love it. I'm so happy for you. And I'm so glad that you got in when you did and that we get this.
Yeah, no, it felt just really serendipitous timing. I think we launched, it was right around the same time the Nebraska Stadium match happened. And that was just mind-blowing to me that you could fill out a full football stadium to watch a volleyball game. So it felt like the right time.
Yeah, I think that's great. Personally biased. I'm a little biased about it. It was a great volleyball match. It's fine. Yeah. So I'll tell you, I explained this to you off camera as well, or before we started, that how I found out about you is I was, doing my own makeshift, probably similar to you, of just I want to understand what's making each team dominant? Like, is there a way to like measure team dominance and who, throughout the season, and started off with just win losses, and kind of like you notice, like that's not enough. You have to dig a little bit deeper into scores. And thinking of other things, I reached out to a lot of volleyball accounts on Twitter and TikTok, and was just like, what else would work? What else would you go with? And one of the accounts is just like, oh, have you looked at Evollve? Because they're doing exactly what you want to do, and they have it all for you. And so that's how I found you. And then as soon as they said that and I started following you guys came out with these amazing statistics of like who's likely to win a conference. And you had that. And each week you'd get to see the different teams kind of, not in the Big Ten. The Big Ten was a little less, I think, variable for number one. The middle pack kind of moved up and down. But watching like the ACC move around, watching the Big 12 move around, that was really, really, really interesting to witness and kind of see how they change. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into predicting who's going to win a conference and how many games they're going to win or lose? Just some of the data, like the
Sure.
factors that go into that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think as I mentioned before, the core of it is like, how good is this team at winning points? And you can measure that very directly just based on just the box scores of the game. But particularly in college, it really matters like who you're playing to. So part of it is just adjusting for the schedule. So like you can win a ton of points, but if you're playing in a mid-major or bottom major team, that's not going to count as much. So there's kind of standard approaches that worked in other sports that worked very well for volleyball, where we can say, okay, this team wins a lot of points and they win a lot of points against really good teams, and that's ultimately what drives the predictions. When it comes to like game to game, there's a few things like home court advantage that obviously exists in volleyball. It exists in pretty much every sport I've ever seen. And so we factor that into the game predictions. There's even a rest component in the predictions as well. So we found that if you're a team playing the second game of a back-to-back and your opponent has rest, that's worth, I think it's like about like half of home court advantage. And so we took a lot, there's to a certain extent, you kind of, get to diminishing returns. And I think there's value in kind of keeping the model simple and focused. So that's pretty much what it is. And then, we just kind of simulate it out. We just, go through the multiverse and, run it 10,000 times and see who comes out on top. And then that's what drives, the predictions that we shared on Twitter. So
you've been doing this for a couple, have you been doing the kind of those predictions for a couple of years as well? Do you have a couple of years worth of data that you can go back and look at and check your accuracy? It's like, do you know, like how is
that's a great question.
At what point in the season are you just like, yep, okay, we feel pretty good about what's happening here?
That is on my to-do list for this season. So we started doing it last year, and when I looked kind of like back tested, it was actually pretty good. Like like in most cases, we were within like a win or two of a team's actual win total. I think this season seemed a little crazier. So I'm very interested to see like how things played out relative to our initial projections. But that is on my to-do list, and I am curious to see how it pans out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just thinking that like again, be very biased. It was like, well, I kind of assumed we'll use Nebraska. I assumed Nebraska would win the Big Ten. I don't think anybody really thought like Penn State was going to have the season they were. A lot of people didn't think Purdue was going to have the season they were. So I'm so curious that when you look at that, like, and so, but just like to see what the stats said at some point. That's just my gut feeling watching it. We know numbers sometimes are very different than gut feelings in the eye test. So yeah, when you get that done, I'd be really, really curious to see kind of the accuracy of it and maybe even more like when it starts getting really accurate. Because you would imagine, right, the more data you get, the more certain you are in kind of how that works out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like at the time when we were doing like the preseason conference projections, we have like a pretty good sample of interconference games to go off of. But what we found is that it's still worthwhile to like take the prior season's data and kind of blend it in a bit. And, if the team's gone through like a lot of turnover, either through transfer portal or just seniors graduating, things like that, we'll discount that more. But, that was part of the projection too, is like, we'll see how they do this year, and then we'll still borrow some insights from the prior year. But like I said, it's on my to-do list. I am interested to see, like, this season felt like it had a bit more ups and downs, aside from the Big Ten, obviously. So that was
Well, and to be fair, within the Big Ten, there were. It just it doesn't help when the like, it was great. I enjoyed this season a whole lot, but you're right. There wasn't a lot of like drama at the top of the Big Ten where there was. I mean, heck, the ACC. I thought for sure that was done. I remember you guys put that out, and it was like it was going to come down to the Pitt Stanford game, and it was like, great, whoever wins this is winning the ACC. And then Stanford lost to SMU, and it was just like, oh no, what are you? No, that's not. Is that fun for you when that happens, or do you, like, as somebody who likes numbers and likes kind of analytics and formulas, do you like when there's chaos, or are you just like, no, I want this to work out the way in like a simple way?
I guess, it's like there's a lot of chaos. Like, it makes me wonder, like, do we need to like fine tune our model, or if things go really out of bounds relative to what we predicted, that's always something we take a look at. And we actually did that last year too. Like, Penn State's a good example. They kind of underachieved this year. They really obviously overachieved last year relative to where our model was projecting, but we took a look at it, and sometimes that is just going to happen. And I think that's the art of model building is taking in new data, understanding what worked, what didn't, but don't overcorrect or hypercorrect to just what happened last season. You're never going to be a completely accurate prognosticator.
Right. At some point, right, there's going to be some deviation. It's always, I would assume, over time, kind of come back to the mean a little bit and be fairly accurate. So
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hold that thought. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and also just there's certain things that are even harder to predict. Like, Wisconsin had some roster changes. Penn State had some roster changes this year. So it's, those are harder to predict, and, particularly like in a systematic way in a conference projection. So.
But are you able to put those in, like when they happen, to help predict in the future? Or is it like, is the formula and are the things that malleable that they can do those in-season changes like that?
Right now, I'll be honest, right now, it's the model's not really set up to do that. But, we are working on is like a more kind of systematic way to evaluate like how much a player is worth. I think we've got a lot of interesting advanced player stats on the site right now, but there's not really kind of an all-in-one evaluation of like, when you have this player on the court, they're going to increase your chances of winning a point by X%. And to me, that's a holy grail of player analysis. That's something we're working on and would hope to continue to make progress on in the off season and see if we can launch that for next year. But like, if you have that kind of viewpoint, then you can plug out players in a more systematic way.
And you could predict National Player of the Year.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Those.
Yeah. We would love to be able to, be part of that conversation. So
that would be amazing. What you talk about the player stats. What are some of the player stats that you guys track and utilize?
So, I would say first, like, we have, all the traditional box score stats, and, you can click on the player and you can see their history, like each season, things like that. And so, just things that, like, are not really easy to access, pre the launch of Evollve. So you can find all those. You can search for players on the site and get kind of their basic stats. I do want to just plug the dig in tool within Evollve. Is if you really want to, like, this player had, 10 aces and 0 service errors. How many times has that happened? Or how many times has it happened in our conference? Did it happen this season? So that's all queryable within the site. And so, it's a pretty flexible tool. If you, just have lots of, random questions about stats and want to understand, like, how remarkable is this, particular performance? So there's all those stats, kind of the basic box score stats. But then, what we've tried to do is, enrich that with what we can build from all the play-by-play data that we have access to. So, and some of this has been fun, kind of taking concepts from other sports and porting them to volleyball. So one I'll bring up is just on-off stats. So it's a fairly common concept in basketball. It's used in hockey as well, of looking at how a team does when a player is on court versus how they're off court. And so we have stats for that. So, it's, you can see like how a team does when a certain player is on court. I think it's probably just interesting to know, like, this player is on the court, half the time. This player, like Harper Murray's, on the court pretty much every rotation. And so There's those types of stats, and you can see how a team does, hitting percentage wise when the player's on versus off, or just overall how the team does. Do they win points or do they not? So there's that. We also have front row versus back row stats. So if you want to know, how does the team do with Harper Murray in the front row versus Harper Murray in the back row? We have stats for that as well, and that's all on the team page and the players' pages as well. I can go on and on, but we have more advanced defense stats. So not only the digs and receptions a player has, those are in the website, but how does a team do when this player gets a dig? Like, what is the hitting percentage off of their digs? Same with receptions. So kind of tracking through the next few touches to see if there's any interesting patterns there. We also have serving data. So, in the traditional box score stats, you can get aces and service errors. There's nowhere, in the traditional stats where you can find just how many times they actually served the ball. So we have stats there. So how many times they served, what's the success rate on serve? Does the team do really well when Bergen Riley's serving versus Laney Choboy? So a lot of stats there. And then on the offense side, we do kind of similar stuff with the attacks. So, you obviously can get standard hitting percentage stats, things like that, but also kind of tracking through what happens after the ball crosses the net. Does the other team get a counterattack? And just kind of tracing through kind of the play-by-play data to kind of see if there's, more you can learn about a player by what happens immediately after the touch.
That's so interesting. So it's just the continuum of the point in the game as it goes on that you guys can track and then break it down by player. That's
exactly.
So cool.
Yeah. So it's, if you go to the team page, it's there's a lot of numbers, and I think, I'm working on making it a bit more navigable, but, if you scroll down there, there's a wealth of information. If you really like to nerd out on the player stats and understand kind of a detailed level, how a team's doing.
And so then you have the team stats. Are they similar, just instead of being about Harper Murray, it's just Nebraska versus other teams? Is that kind of what those team stats look like when you have those?
In general, yeah, I would say, for the most part, there's usually a team and a player analog for a lot of the stats. So,
okay, nice. That's so much. And now I just want to bring it up and only look at it and not even do the rest of the podcast. Let's just go. Let's just nerd out, Mike. This is I love this so much. It sounds so silly, and I feel like I say this every time, but I like you said, every other sport has this. Well, not every other sport, but football has this. There are so many people who are dedicated to football analytics, and there's so many people who are dedicated to men's basketball analytics, and women's basketball analytics is really coming up too. It's got such a natural counterpart with men that it kind of makes sense. And obviously baseball and softball is just, I think, a data nerd's dream is to get in and do all of that. And I keep going back to how did this not exist before? How is this new? This is amazing. This is what everybody should love. If you want to learn stats and data, this is it. Just go to Evollve.
No, it's been a lot of fun. And we're so glad to be on the podcast here. I think one of our biggest challenges is just, finding the community and making sure people are aware that, if this is the stuff you're into, there's tools out there for you. So.
Well, I hope this helps. I don't know quite what our reach is, but I'm hoping if it's just a couple, even just a few people, that it helps. And because it is a fun website to dig around in. If you have time, you can, like you said, you can get lost very easily down the rabbit hole of players and comparing years. Is that what I've seen, that you can kind of go back to past seasons?
Yeah, we've got stats going back to 2019. I think eventually we'd like to go even further. The data availability and consistency kind of, starts to dwindle as you go further back, but we would love to add more seasons going back to prior to 2019. But right now it goes back. So we got, 6 years worth of seasons, including the COVID season in there right now.
Yeah.
So
That's enough to keep people busy. Let people get lost in that. And all right, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to share, because now we're going to talk about, we've talked a little bit about what went into the season and those predictions of how each conference was, how the conferences were going to go. But it's tournament time. It's postseason time. This is the part everybody like plays their whole season for. We all sat and watched the selection show, even though, well, no, there were a lot of people who didn't know if they were going to get picked, a lot of teams. And even if you kind of knew you were going, it's always fun to see who's in your bracket. And that's what we're excited about. And I went on to Evollve today and just saw it and went, oh, this is so cool. And I need help putting my bracket together. So I'm just going to use you guys. So let's see if I can present this. Share screen. This is the first time I've tried to do this. So I'm hoping that that's coming up for everybody. Please excuse all the like BJ, all the hospital stuff on my computer. But this is what, if you go to evollve.net and then click on NCAA tournament predictions, which you can follow along with Fanflare. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about what Fanflare is before we get started?
Absolutely. So yeah, this is like just on the topic of, tools that, should have existed by now. This is another great one. So this is a few really smart people put together this app. This is for real-time NCAA volleyball scores. So that was like one of the big like surprises to me when I started getting into the sport. Like just like finding a way to easily get real-time scores was surprisingly difficult. They've made it very easy. It's a great app, very easy to use. I suggest you follow for tournament time. We were lucky to get our Evollve ratings and some of our Evollve stats integrated within the app as well. But it's just a fantastic tool, and I think definitely something needed for the volleyball community.
And I will keep bugging the creators of it so we can get an Android version. I know the Apple's out, the Android's out. I'm just going to keep bugging till we get it because I want it so badly. But poor Android user, have pity on us. So yeah, if you have Apple and you're an Apple phone and you're interested in this, definitely go get the Fanflare app, check it out, follow along, see what, play around in there and see what's going on with that. It's an easy way to get into some of these predictions and statistics. So we'll start here with the overall tournament prediction. I'm hoping that's easy. I'm hoping people can see it. If not, we'll read through some of them because I know it's a pretty small screen. This is organized by the chance of winning is this just in each round of the tournament? I'm reading that correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Each is, their chance of winning first round, second round, and then it's sorted by the chance of winning the overall championship.
So one number I'm going to just, again, as a fan, this is a great season for me because my team is so good and I get to enjoy it. But I just want to talk about that real quick about Nebraska. We'll talk about the others, but there are some pretty impressive numbers here that Texas is up there for a while, which if I can backtrack, I loved the graph that you guys would put out that was like the chances of, is it like the odds of winning a point, right, in a random game or something, and it was really fun to watch. And then Nebraska just whoop, nobody was close. That's how this feels. Very similar to that of like there's a lot of teams that are like, yep, probably win the first round, probably really high 90% chance to win the second round. Sweet 16 starts to drop a little bit. Elite 8, Final 4, Nebraska's at a 55.5% chance of just before it even starts of winning a national championship. And that's not like 55% out of 2 teams. That's out of all of the teams, correct?
Yeah. It's we did some double checking. Like I knew Nebraska was gonna be the heavy favorite, but to be pre-tournament and hogging more than half of the championship probability is almost absurd. But I think it speaks to just how much Nebraska has just separated themselves from the field when it comes to their performance this season. So yeah, we double checked this, and I was actually just checking how we forecasted prior tournaments, and we did this in 2022. The highest was Texas, and that was 27%. Nebraska was 19%, and next year Wisconsin 2023 30%, Nebraska 23%. Last year was a little closer. 2024 we had Pitt at 48%, Nebraska at 28%. Penn State came in and surprised us for sure. But I think what distinguishes this year, it's Nebraska 55.5, and then the next closest team is all the way down to Texas at 12. So like I said, I think it just speaks to just how incredibly dominant they've been, and not just winning matches, but winning them convincingly.
And so again, this goes back to, like you said, it's like the amount of points scored, the amount of points opponents scored, like efficiency, those kinds of things is what goes into these percentages or these odds essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they've lost one set over the past I don't know how many matches, and they beat Penn State. I mean, Penn State's they declined a bit this year, but they're still like a decent team. They're going to be in the tournament, but beat them straight sets, and it was like 25-14. Like it was very convincing as well. So
yeah, that's whatever. I love it. It's music to my ears, but it's so interesting as well to see kind of that gap. And even if you look at that Final Four, the Elite Eight, that's I think it's like the Elite Eight gap is the one that is just throwing me. I mean, the championship, yes, obviously, but to see like a 20% drop in likelihood and chances of winning the Elite Eight, and Texas and Kentucky a little bit higher there. Is that probably because they beat Texas twice now? I guess that would be their, oh no, sorry. I'm talking in circles. That's not their Elite Eight. That's their Final Four.
Yeah, it's like this is their their like Elite Eight column would be their probability of advancing to the Final Four. So this is like if you win the Elite Eight round, you're advancing to the Final Four. So
it's interesting. It's interesting to me if I'm going to look at those numbers, and maybe this is like being too myopic, and tell me if it is. That Kentucky has a higher chance of winning the Elite Eight than Texas does, not by much, but a little bit, but a lower chance of winning the Final Four.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think I believe Kentucky is ranked second and Texas third, but in Evollve, I think we've got Texas slightly above Kentucky. Okay. And, like it's close enough that it's they're fairly evenly matched, but I think that's also just I'm trying to remember who's in Kentucky's bracket, but I think that probably just means they've got an easier path to get there. So there's just some tougher draws that Texas has got to go through compared to Kentucky.
That's okay. That's a great explanation. And I feel like, Mike, we could talk all day about which bracket is easier and tougher. It's been a huge point of contention online. I don't know if you've seen any of that. I got hooked into it and I shouldn't have, but I did, trying to predict like who got the toughest bracket in this. Some of them seem like they are easier than others, but again, maybe the matchups don't feel the same. So we won't get into it. We could. I feel like we could break it down into who actually has the hardest bracket of the top four, but we won't. Yeah. We won't. That's a debate that I don't think we're ready for.
I think it's fine. Like what I've seen, like in other sports as well, like that really doesn't drive a whole lot of variance in like who really has a chance to win. It's usually just about how good the team is, and the bracket draws can matter a bit on the margins, but it's probably not as important as the arguments make it seem out to be. So
there we go. That's the end of it. It doesn't matter what bracket you're in. If you're that good, you'll beat them.
Yeah.
That's it. So stop fighting, Twitter. Me. That's me. I'll stop fighting too. So I'm looking at this and seeing, and it's interesting just to see like Tennessee as a 7 seed is there at like number 12. I mean, you've got a bunch of teams that are kind of at a similar % likelihood to win the championship, but some of their other numbers are a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. Do you think, is that an indication, or I'm not even going to ask, is that an indication? What does that mean to you that you've got a 7 seed higher than some 4 seeds, higher than a 3 seed? What does that tell you?
Like usually what that tells us, like when we're, disconnected from say the rankings or the seedings, usually the seedings are based on like, win-loss record, and the tournament committee does their best to account for strength of schedule and RPI metrics and all that, but it's really driven by win-loss. And like I mentioned before, like our rankings are based on actual like points won, and kind of what we found in Tennessee, and like we actually have a measure of this on the site called Luck, which is basically how many wins you would expect a team to have based on how many points they won. Because sometimes you can like with volleyball, it's interesting. Like basketball, if you win more points than the other team in a game, you're going to win 100% of the time. In volleyball, that doesn't even happen sometimes. You can win more points, but if you win them in the wrong order, you can lose the match. And so like Tennessee is actually the 315th in luck. So like, there's very few teams that like had a strong percentage of points resume, but a not as good win-loss resume. So I'm trying to do the math here in my head, but like basically like based on the number of points that Tennessee won, we would expect them to have like maybe one or two more wins. And if they did, then they'd probably be at a higher seed. So that's, I think that's the fundamental difference between, our rankings and like what you tend to see like in polls and seeds is that it's our rankings focus less on the noisy win-loss records and focuses more on like, does this team win points? And that tends to be more predictive of success than just win-loss.
It's really interesting. And it's a great way. I think there has been some of that discussion, but without having, I don't want to say the numbers to back it up, right? You're again just going off your gut or your eye test, which we know, even as fans, like we know is not always predictive. I mean, last year's a great example. I mean, I think if you look, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that Louisville was going to beat Pittsburgh last year, right? You didn't think Penn State was going to win the whole thing last year, just based off the eye test or your feeling of how these teams, you thought Pittsburgh, Nebraska were just going to run the table, and they didn't. So it's interesting to see a team like that. So now if Tennessee, let's say, does do, I don't remember what bracket they're in, but let's say they do really well, and people may look at that and be like, well, they were, a 7 seed. What are they doing? There's other things that could be into account here that, that we don't think about because there's these numbers behind it.
Yeah. The win-loss record just kind of tends to dominate the conversation and the general evaluation of a team. So
are there any teams? There's 2 questions that I'm going to ask here, and try to ask the one that maybe I don't know which one it is first. But are there any teams who, if you look at this, kind of how they ended the season, their likelihood of winning, all of these things, that just say off the top of your head have under or overperformed based on what you maybe thought they would have done, or maybe early projections had them doing? That's an on-the-spot question. I'm so sorry.
It's a good question as well. I did not expect, like, I knew Nebraska was going to be strong. And they've kept most of their team intact over the past couple of years. I did not expect them to go 30-0. So like, I don't think you would ever kind of expect that pregame. So I think the only drama we had in our conference projections is we would project like the likelihood of Nebraska like running the table, and even then, like at the outset of the season, it was definitely not a sure thing. So I think just the fact almost seems like they found like a different gear as the season has progressed. So that has been a bit surprising. I don't have a great answer here. Like I am pleasantly surprised by Indiana, and only because I grew up in Indiana, graduated from Indiana University. So it's great to see the team having a really strong season this year. I can't wait to see them in the tournament. So, I think they were kind of on the bubble like the past couple seasons, like they showed some promise. So really, really great to see them succeed this year. And yeah, like I said, can't wait to see them in the tournament. So
awesome. Yeah, Indiana more so, I think, than Purdue. But I think Purdue's another one. If we're going to talk about Big Ten schools, I think people and similarly, I'm gonna fully admit this. I think my fiance covers Purdue sports, and he just sent me a message and just said to end the podcast now. He's
I did grad school for 2 years at that house, so.
But I think we talked to Dave Shondell after that Indiana game, and he talked about, he's like, yeah, Indiana's come so far above what people thought they would do. Purdue has come so far above what people thought they would do, given kind of what, for Purdue at least, for like what happened in the offseason, and Indiana for having this like team full of freshmen. That's and I think like that's been, for me, as somebody who's like, I'm fine, my team's good, I like watching other teams, such a pleasant surprise. Some of these other ones feel, they feel right. Like it makes sense that, like SMU would still be doing really well. Stanford with all of their freshmen still doing well. It's exciting. I don't know that there's any. Florida's a little surprising at 15 and 11, to kind of had the season they had, but I don't know. I think it's fun. I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for Indiana.
Yeah,
Don't listen to that. I'm not.
I think Wisconsin will be interesting too, just like, given the roster, like shifts they've had this year. And it does seem like, we've got them ranked 7th, but, like I can definitely see them, turning it on in the tournament as well. So.
Yeah, getting Charlie back made a real big impact for them. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting. I think when that initially, thinking back before she came back, it was you almost had they weren't going to do like so. My opinion is like they weren't going to kind of have the Penn State fall off, but it was a little bit of a concern of like what's happening, what's going on with them. And I think some of I remember watching it through the Big Ten. Right predictions through the season and just thinking like what's happening to Wisconsin? Why are they it's not my Wisconsin that I grew up watching. So yeah, that'll be really fun. Are there any other teams that you think might kind of have a surprise? I mean, I know we've got the numbers here and we can do that, but are there any that you think maybe has I don't want to say a better likelihood of making a surprise run, but I don't know. Are there any other teams you think might surprise some people in the tournament?
I don't know if calling out Creighton counts as a surprise. I mean, I know they're a powerhouse, but like we do our own bracket based on the Evollve picks. Like we've got them beating Arizona State as the lower seed. So I think Creighton could surprise people and get past Arizona State in their bracket. I think that would be my main pick. I'm trying to think of who else, like early round upsets. If anybody's filling out their brackets, Kansas State, Florida, and North Carolina, I think we all think have a better shot of winning, even though as a lower seed in the first round. So,
nice. All right.
And then Texas A&M over Louisville. So I think Texas A&M I think is really strong. I think they've got a chance to beat Louisville. So,
really, I think that in I'm obviously very excited for all of Nebraska's games, and I think like Nebraska Miami might be is going to be kind of a fun one to watch, but that Texas A&M Louisville one don't know if I'm like excited or terrified for it because those are such good teams. I think Texas A&M is probably one of the better 3 seeds. You have them here as the second best 3 seed. I'm not sure, and I know Louisville's on here as like the third 2 seed. But all those 2 seeds are so similar in my mind that it's like they're all kind of that good. So you've got a really, really good 3 seed, a really good 2 seed that are probably closer to each other than in any of the other brackets, is my guess.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what's shaken out in the rankings. Like if you just even like look at the rankings that we publish on social or on our Substack, like you can almost just kind of like eyeball the tiers. It's like Nebraska's on their own, like they're in their own tier. Texas, Kentucky, Pitt are kind of in their own tier as well, and then it's like SMU, Stanford, Wisconsin, Texas A&M, and Louisville are all kind of like the next group that really strong, and then you have kind of like another drop off after that. So
it's going to be fun. I think like you said, because it was such a weird season, it does group so many of those teams together, and I think that's a lot more interesting than just a pure chalk tournament.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we will, because we are a Nebraska account or podcast, so we have to talk about Nebraska a little bit here.
Of course.
So still on your website, looking at this is kind of the team. Walk me through what I'm looking at here, actually. So I'm not even going to pretend that I can explain this better than you.
Sure.
From that kind of tournament thing, clicking on Nebraska, what are we looking at?
So right now this is a Nebraska team page, and this just tells you like how they did, different, categories by season. And what we've got, like for every single stat, you'll see like a number underneath it. And that just tells you like the rank. So like basically Nebraska was, as we all know, number 1 in Evollve rating this season. Last year in 2024, they were number 2. And so, this is kind of like the so what of, how the team did overall, and then how they ranked within all the NCAA Division I teams. And so, if you scroll down, you can get to, just kind of won-loss records. Volleyball values is the next section. Didn't get a chance to talk about, but that was another thing that was fun to build out. So not sure if you're familiar with basketball and what's known as the 4 factors, but this was like a way of organizing basketball stats to try to like really focus on like what do good teams do, what do bad teams do, what do good teams do well, what do bad teams don't do well, and like what really drives scoring points and winning games in basketball. And so on the basketball side, it's, do you shoot well? Do you get to the free throw line? Do you rebound well? Do you avoid turnovers? And, if you know those 4 things, you kind of know everything there is to know about a team to a certain extent. And so we tried to build something similar for volleyball. It was more challenging than we thought, but it was a very interesting path to go down. We had a few false starts and a couple competing versions, but what we, aligned on kind of organizing things by is one, just like kind of breaking a point up into its component pieces. So we start off with first, just like how do you do on serve? So how many aces, how many errors, and then we have a way of kind of combining that into a serving average, which is kind of like a batting average for serving. So that's one factor, is like how do you do on serve? So once you get past the serve, then we have how do you hit on serve receive? So like really isolating how teams do on serve receive and how well they hit there. And then we split out like in transition. So once you get past first ball, then how does the team do in transition? Because that can be a very different type of skill, very different type of way the point evolves. And so those are like the most important ones. And we also have one more, which is attack conversion rate, which is after you get the dig, after you get the reception, like how often do you actually convert that into an attack? So like I said, it's been fun to kind of build that out and like you really figure out like how do you organize volleyball into like a statistically valid way. But those are the components we've aligned on, and then you can do that both for the team, but also like how do you prevent your opponent from doing those same things. So you can see like how Nebraska ranks under these volleyball values as well for each season.
It's so interesting to see this because some of this makes sense, right? Like you would think your transition hitting average. Yes, we have, one of the best offenses in terms of our hitting percentage in the country. And then that serving average is so interesting because it's so 42.8%, which is, it looks like ranked about 230. But then you look at last year, and I know it's different and all that, but that's 43.6%, which is not even a full percentage. Well, I can do math, a little over a full percentage difference. And we were ranked 99th in the green versus the 230, right? And so like is that just an indication of how close all of these teams really are with some of those numbers?
I think that's part of it. Like, this is something I've like wondered about a bit. Like my theory is that like, particularly like, I think you see this with like a lot of really strong teams is that, Nebraska like wins matches not because they're like, super good on getting you aces and avoiding service errors. They win matches like just in rallies, basically. Like once you're playing real volleyball, like you're in trouble against a team like Nebraska. And so I think, they don't have to be good on serve. Like, they've got their offense and their defense to win matches for them. What I've always found interesting, though, you can see it off to the right, is their opponents don't serve well against them either. So like one here means like their opponents have a really low serving average. And I think this is almost like a tactic by opponents. If you're playing like a really strong opponent, you don't want to get them in a rally. Like you're going to take chances and like, really try to like, get those like on the line serves. And so you're going to like probably error out a lot more. So I think that's what's happening there. And then probably also just, it's maybe harder to ace some of Nebraska's players. So.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And that's a good point. And I don't want to say I haven't thought about it, but as fans, we want all the points, right? We want to score always. And I've been a part of the conversation of like, man, we don't serve as well. Like we watch teams that have these like really high, they lead the conference in aces, they lead the country in aces, and then we're like, oh, we exist, but we don't do that a lot. But that's such a good point of like, we don't have to, which sounds so cocky, doesn't it? But that's not, it's not supposed to. But you're right. Like if you're balanced and you can kind of make up for it in other ways, that's maybe a place where you don't have to take those risks, which then come with fewer errors, or that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I got a question that asked if that number is potentially lower due to the amount of times we serve. So it's like just going on like serving a lot. So if we go on like runs or something without getting aces, would that impact that number?
That's a good question. Been one of the challenging and interesting things about analyzing volleyball stats is just the nature of like when you win a point, you serve, and like how that like kind of skews stats in interesting ways. But this is always divided by like how many times the team serves. So like it shouldn't be affected by like how many times they actually serve, because it's always divided by like whatever number of service opportunities they have. So
I gotcha. Okay. So that might not be, I mean, it's something to consider, but it really probably doesn't. It probably doesn't help explain why that's so low, so much as like not, like you said, like not needing to and being able to win in the rallies versus having to win at the service line.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Okay. And so then down at I don't even say the bottom because this just keeps going. We have our match probabilities. These, I'm guessing, looking at them, using my brain, these are just the likelihoods of what the kind of outcomes of those matches are going to be. Is it they sweep? Is it 3-1, 3-2? Wins, losses? That okay?
Yeah, these are all like relative to a Division I average team, which like once again, I think the spread of talent in Division I volleyball is probably wider than in other sports, but also just because Nebraska is so dominant that you give them an average Division I team, they have a 97% chance of winning in straight sets. So it's
that's insane. I'm sorry, that's just insane.
Yeah.
That I can't even fathom that. I'm sorry, I'm gonna fangirl, so I gotta stop doing that. I'm just gonna fan about my team, but like. It's like you said at the beginning, you knew this team was going to be good. I don't think anybody, I mean, you see that last year they were very good too, at a 96, 97% probability of winning a sweep. But man, that just seems, but even all those other numbers, right? They're a little bit higher. That's all low. It's all so low for us. Ugh, that's disgusting. Yeah. I love it. So then we've got some of our more traditional box score type information here with our team totals.
Yeah, exactly. And everything like what's nice is like at least for me, it's just like always having the ranks underneath. So you just like know, like here's the number, but then here's how it stacks up against all the other teams. And if you want to nerd out on a different type of number, if you click the percentile button and the banner there on the top right, it'll do it in terms of if you prefer like, percentiles as opposed to ranks, you can go back and forth. So
nice. For people who know what percentiles are, that's very helpful to see. But then, okay, so you go to ranks, and I guess if you really don't want it.
Yeah, if you're annoyed by all those numbers, then you can just go.
Like it's too much. That's awesome. Okay. And so then those per match, per set, so it really gets broken down. And then all the opponent information. That's amazing. Mike, this is so cool. If you guys aren't looking at any of this, once the tournament is done, take the off season and dig through your favorite teams and find something. So my call to action to all of you is to find something that you learned from this.
Yeah, and if you like clicked into like each year, then you get like the player level drill down of each season. So like click on 2025, and then like some of the player sets I'd referenced.
Nice.
Kind of go nuts with that as well. So
I wondered if that was the next kind of iteration into it. Yeah. So then I assume if you click on the name, it breaks it down, just their information. There you go. You can find everything you could possibly want to find in one place, which is the beauty of this, like you said, rather than having to search through NCAA, ESPN, and the teams, things. It's all here.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That was the goal.
You've done a great job. I'm just gonna say it right now. It's the best because nobody else is doing it. So good job, Mike.
When graded on the curve, we're doing great. So
yeah, you're better than everybody else trying to do it. Oh boy. All right, let me stop sharing that and come back to the actual StreamYard. And let's see if there's any comments. Okay. Just a few here. If you're watching and you have comments, you have things you want to say, you have questions for Mike, please feel free to put them in the chat. I think Tony's just highlighting what we've said. It's cool to see how much more dominant, for example, Nebraska's offense is compared to the last several years. To actually be able to see it and not just, again, eye test it.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have any more comment. There's nobody else here. Mike, who, let's just chat. As somebody, you do volleyball. I'm sure you watch volleyball. I'm sure it's hard to, we've had some of our football people on shows before, and they've talked about like, it's hard to take the kind of the analyst hat off. It's hard to sometimes to watch the game and go with your feelings, and because you're always thinking. Are you able to do that when you watch volleyball? Are you able to just say like, I'm just going to enjoy this game and not think about all the numbers behind it?
It is hard for me, but it's fun for me as well. But it is hard for me to disentangle. And like what I found, like just doing sports analytics, I've done it for like 10 plus years now. It does weird things to your fandom and how you enjoy sports, and even like silly stuff, like, something weird will happen in a game, whether it's volleyball or basketball. And like, normally like it'd be, oh, that's cool that happened. But like, then I'm thinking, oh man, is that going to like break our code, or are we going to have to like, fix the website? Cause like we don't anticipate something like this happening. So it does weird things to your fandom. For the most part, like, if it's it gets to be like, and this applies to any game, it gets to be like a really like, close game, like fifth set volleyball, is like, feels like psychological torture at times, just how much, leverage and like, meaning is on each point once you get, close to that 15-point level. So I can usually turn it off then, because it just becomes like, you just kind of know what's at stake and like how high pressure it is. So, for the most part I can, but like, it's fun for me to kind of like, do both in my head. So.
Do you, I don't know if this is the controversial question, but for some sports people it is. Do you believe in the power of like momentum? So if we're going to talk about a fifth set, right, we know how hard, like just mentally, physically it is to reverse sweep, because you're like backs against wall. You have to win at this point. And so you can't measure momentum. Like that's not really an easy, I guess unless you look at like how the points different like in each set. But is there any of that you've thought about or taken into consideration of like, if you're going into a fifth and just your team, again, I'm gonna use the Nebraska-Kentucky game because I was there for that game, and you just saw like, you knew once Nebraska won that one, and then it was like, oh, they were okay, now they're rolling, and then it was just like, okay, yep, okay, I think we can do it. But I've seen fifth sets where it's like, this team should win. They've got the momentum, and then the other team comes back. Is there anything that you can track for like that kind of information?
There is. I think, there's definitely like a danger, like particularly like folks like me that are more number focused, to like discount things like momentum, or like, kind of more human elements of like, how players feel and react kind of real time to certain situations. So like, you don't want to discount that. These aren't robots, in a spreadsheet playing a game. These are human beings. But like what I found is like, usually like what people describe as momentum is measurable. Like I think sometimes people don't realize that, but you can measure that, like, in terms of like, what's the probability of a team winning a fifth set versus like if they're on the verge of a reverse sweep versus whether it was like 1-1, 1-1, something like that. So like in general, what I've seen is I've seen very little evidence for momentum, but one thing that volleyball like has been different in other sports is like what's been more universal in a lot of other sports is actually almost the opposite of momentum. It's like what's called the rubber band effect. So like if you ever played Mario Kart as well? Like, anytime a team is trailing or, a car is trailing, like they kind of get a boost and like kind of keeps games closer. And like you see that in basketball, like teams do better when they're playing from behind. I found it in soccer. I think they find it in football as well. And, I think there's a lot of potential reasons for that, psychological or tactical, but, that's like been kind of a universal theme I've seen in a lot of sports. I've tried to find it in volleyball and I really haven't seen it. So like, I'm not sure if it's because of like, like the set, dynamics of volleyball, like where each kind of like set kind of restarts things. But that is, one thing I haven't seen in volleyball that I have seen in other sports. I haven't really seen kind of, like true momentum. But your question here is reminding me, I want to dust off like that analysis of like, how how likely a team is to win a fifth set based on like how they got to that point. Because I think, that's a very direct way of measuring, like, is it truly that, does the team truly have momentum if they're on the verge of a reverse sweep, or does it not matter? Is it, they're going to win half the time anyway. So,
yeah. Even if, and I feel like even if you find that it doesn't matter, that's still so interesting because it's like when I just remember in all of my stats classes of just like sometimes finding nothing is just as interesting, if not more, than finding what you think you're going to find. Because you're just like, well, okay, no, it doesn't exist. Like the idea of momentum non-existing in volleyball is like crazy as a fan, but also maybe it's comforting as a fan. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think those are just as interesting as like the ones that confirm it. Like, you're seeing these arguments play out on the football side too. Like there's a controversial like decision not to go for a 2-point conversion, and then people argue, well, that's going to demoralize the team. It's your wreck their momentum, and then people share data sign that's like that doesn't really happen. Like your kind of narratives of like how you think players are going to react don't always stand up to the actual data, because I think players and humans are just more complicated than some of the narratives we pick for them. So
turns out, yeah. So Tony asked another question. You are unbiased in the sense that you're not a Nebraska fan. Who are you predicting to make the Final Four? Is it a chalk?
It is a very boring answer. Yeah. So
okay.
Nebraska, Texas, Kentucky, Pitt. So
okay.
I'm going to stick with our Evollve ratings, but also like like I mentioned before, there's a clear dividing line between those three teams and the rest. So it's if I had to put money on it, that's who I'm picking.
Who are you taking to the national champ? Who's winning each of their Final Four matchups?
I guess that's the only surprise, because I think we've got a Nebraska-Texas final. So we got Texas slight edge over Kentucky, even though Kentucky I think was the number 2 polled team and number 2 seed team by the committee. So.
Okay. And I'm not going to ask because I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position of having to agree with me or picking our rival. So Mike, I'm not even going to ask who you think is going to win it all. I'm just going to go with what Evollve says.
We can go with that. Yeah. my best non-Nebraska, anti-Nebraska take on this is like Nebraska is like obviously very dominant and like the odds-on favorite to win. It's only 55%. So like, you flip a coin, it comes up tails. That's Nebraska doesn't win. So like, it's like Nebraska's the team you'd pick, but it's not going to be surprising if some other team actually makes it through. So,
yeah. This is not related to your stats. This is just related to volleyball in general. Do you have a match that you've watched this year that you're just like, man, it was the best match of volleyball I've watched? Do you have a top game that you've watched?
I would say I'll say I didn't get a chance to watch it live, but it was the SEC championship game. I think the Texas Kentucky and just the insane comeback. So I always love seeing those, and so that was just amazing to see Kentucky that's like an insane comeback in any situation, but to do it for the SEC championship was just insane. So.
Okay. I have one last question for you about this, and it is related to what you just said and then related to what you had talked about earlier about things that kind of go into it. And it's this idea of rest component. Obviously the SEC championship was 2 weeks ago. And then the Big Ten, the ACC kept playing games. So, right. Like the Big Ten finished Saturday and selection show was Sunday, and then they play Thursday. Teams like Kentucky and Texas have had a little bit more time off. all the other SEC teams that get in have had even more time off. Is there, oh, I can take this message off. Sorry. Is there, so two kind of questions in one, like, does that benefit teams like the SEC teams where they get a little bit more rest? Or is there kind of a point of diminishing returns where it's like 3 days off it doesn't make as big of a difference as 4 or 5 days off? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is there a point where it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter that much?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to be on the doesn't matter that much. I've seen this argument play out across a lot of different sports. It's the whole rust versus rest dynamic. And, like I mentioned before, like there is definitely a quantifiable like disadvantage if you're playing on really short rest. So second game of a back-to-back, that shows up in basketball all the time. That shows up even in football if a team's playing Sunday and then they have to turn around and play Thursday. Really short rest definitely does impact. I have not seen anything convincing saying that a team like that's got like an extra week or two of rest is at a disadvantage. It's plausible, but I don't think there's been any data like that really kind of confirms that hypothesis. So for lack of anything more compelling, I would assume as long as both teams have, a minimum level of rest, like they're on an even playing field. So
okay. That's you're right. There's been that discourse. I think you can look back at back to the football championships, right? The playoffs last year where all the teams that got a bye lost. And there was that joke of you don't want, you needed to play, you needed to get warmed up and go in and play. But how much of that was just the teams that got it? And right. So, but then with this tournament, there's been that conversation of this is good because these SEC teams, these, other teams that have tournaments that end earlier get that time to recover as opposed to teams that are playing Saturday and then have to just 4 days later go back and play. But I wondered if there was just a point where it's 1 or 2 days is kind of the benefit and anything more than that doesn't make a difference. So if you do end up finding anything, I'd be interested to know. I bet the conferences would be interested to know what the benefit of where kind of that point of that optimal rest point is.
Yeah. I think when we did take a look at I think I tried to see if does 2 days rest matter and even how many points they played, and nothing kind of really leapt out of the data aside from definitely second game of a back-to-back, that's clearly a disadvantage. Beyond that, it kind of washes out. These are pretty high level athletes, pretty well conditioned. So you give them a day or two rest. And I find the whole rust explanation is usually it works in retrospect. So if all the teams with a bye win, it's because they weren't rusty, they were rested. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming on and spending this time and explain, go through your kind of what Evollve is, how you got into it, what it's showing, and even kind of walking us through what it looks like on there. I very much appreciate it. This has been so interesting for me, so fun. We could just sit and do this all day. I'd be like, yes, please teach me all of this. Is there anything before we go? We typically do on the show, we do parting shots, which is just your opportunity for one last, 1 or 2 short last kind of call outs or call to actions or promotions, anything like that. So let me get the banner up because the boys always make fun of me for skipping all the media that we have on here because I'm terrible at it. So let's find it. Maybe there it is. It's parting shots time.
All right.
So Mike, as our guest, I will let you go first.
All right. I don't know if these are parting shots or not, but I just want, visit evollve.net, download the Fanflare app, and, enjoy the tournament. But then also just, if there's things that, you wish you knew about a game or a stat you wish you could do, or just things you thought would make the site better, we are all ears. We've learned a lot, on volleyball and, but I think, we're always looking to get the input from the community, and really make this site and this tool useful for people that really love the sport. So reach out to us. Got a lot of different ways on social. So just would love any feedback or thoughts on what we can do to make the site better.
I love it. I'm gonna echo so many of those. Go check out evollve.net. if there's a stat that you found particularly interesting, share it. Share it with me, share it with Mike, share it with Evollve. Let us know what you found that you really enjoy learning about. Yep. Download the Fanflare app. They've reached out. They want to do a show. I would love to have them on. We can talk about that too. So be on the lookout. We'll have them on. We'll promote them some more, which helps promote you guys. And yeah, guys, the tournament starts Thursday, and before you know it, volleyball's done. It just is going to be over in a flash. So enjoy it while you can. Support the players, support the athletes. My thing I say always is that these are 18 to 22-year-old women. Be very kind and remember that they are children. They're 18 to 22-year-old girls. They may get paid, but they are still, deserving of kindness. And so with that, I appreciate, again, Mike, thank you so much for coming on and teaching us so much about this. And that's another episode of the Go Big Redcast.
Yeah, thank you, Abbie.
A Herd at Sports Network production.